Welcome to the Rising from the Ashes podcast. I'm your host, Amy Grace. Obsessed with coffee, cowboy boots, and deep relationships, I'm on a mission to help you find the gold in your story through faith, family, and wellness. Because I believe your story can break you wide open to live a beautiful, abundant, and vibrant life. I'll share with you how the hard seasons and difficult circumstances can become a catalyst of growth that often lead into some of the most beautiful stories we've ever told. I'm so grateful you're here. Grab a cup of coffee and let's talk. Welcome back, friends. This might just be the episode you've been waiting for. Today, we're going to have a very vulnerable conversation. A conversation that could possibly feel a little uncomfortable for you, but one that I hope brings light to a very dark problem. Today, we're going to talk about addiction, and probably not the type of addiction you're comfortable talking about. But we're going to go deep and hope to discover freedom. I know we all probably joke around about being addicted to success or something in a more humorous light. But at its core, addiction, it steals so much from us. It steals depth and meaning and life and love. But the one thing addiction will never be able to steal is the truth. The truth of who God is, the truth of what God is able to do in a surrendered heart, and the truth of who God says you and I are when we invite Him into our lives. Unfortunately, I'm familiar with addiction. It's something I grew up in. And when most of us hear the word addiction, we most likely think of alcohol or drugs. But just a quick Google search will reveal that the list is a lot more inclusive than just those. Other addictions could possibly include gambling, sex, pornography, food, the internet, mobile devices, shopping, and honestly, the list could go on. These behavioral addictions may not be something that we test for. They may be things that seem a little bit easier to sweep under the rug, so to speak, and maybe we feel like we're a little bit more in control of those, or at least in control of our image. But maybe that makes them more devastating. We can portray this really great life on the outside and yet be completely miserable and empty on the inside. Maybe these things don't show up on a drug screen, but they will show up in relationships, in finances, in mental health, and they will affect every single aspect of our life. Today, we're going to talk specifically about sex and pornography addiction. Okay, I warned you, this could be uncomfortable. But let's just do a quick review of the statistics. From Covenant Eyes, in their study back in 2018, they published that 28,258 users are watching pornography every second. They also report that $3,075.64 is spent on pornography every second on the internet. 1 in 5 mobile searches are for pornography. 1 in 5 youth pastors and 1 in 7 senior pastors use pornography on a regular basis and are currently struggling. That's more than 50,000 U.S. church leaders. Just among Christians alone, 64% of Christian men and 15% of Christian women say they watch pornography at least once a month. Y'all, can you imagine the general public? That's just Christian statistics. And only 7% of pastors report that their church has a ministry program for those struggling with pornography. Y'all, that's a problem. A big problem. And that was 2018. Can you imagine what the statistics look like 6 years later in 2024? In the same study from Covenant Eyes, they reported that the first exposure to pornography among men is 12 years old on average. But with the increase in technology and children having earlier access to cell phones, tablets, TVs, and the list could go on. I hate to even imagine what the average age is currently. From our personal experience, it can sometimes feel like the church as a whole just wants to say a prayer, put a Band-Aid on it, and please don't let us see that ugly wound again. This struggle can feel unacceptable to talk about in Christian circles, and yet it feels impossible to overcome. And you want to know why? Sin thrives in darkness. As long as no one knows, you can continue to live a double life and still look thriving and successful on the outside, while literally dying on the inside. So today I have my sweet husband here, and he's going to share a little glimpse into his story and his journey to recovery. I'm super grateful that he was willing to do this, and we're just going to jump right in.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we're just going to jump right in. Tell me, how old were you when you were first exposed to pornography?
I think as far back as I can remember, probably when I was about at the age of 10.
Okay. And then at what age did you realize that you couldn't stop, even if you wanted to stop looking at pornography?
I think the around age was probably around 20 to 25. I started talking about it with pastors, leadership in the church, started having kind of check-ins, if you will, with certain leadership and other authority figures. I think, but a lot of times I felt really just my personal feelings was really judged, really a lot of shame around every time I would just mess up, or just the shock of the use of the pornography. And I got really good at just kind of faking it or acting like I was okay. I wanted help, but nothing seemed to be working. And so it became easier for me just to live with the problem and kind of put on a good front.
Okay, so by 2018, we were married, we had a baby, and the truth started spilling out. And honestly, I feel like it came faster than we could process. I called it quits, but neither one of us really knew how to move forward from there. Obviously, there were a lot of feelings and a lot of details that we're not going to get into here. But ultimately, you decided to go into a rehab type thing shortly after the discovery of this double life.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that was a really big step. Number one, because I didn't fully support your decision. And I feel like that had a lot to do with my past and with my dad and his attempts at rehab for alcohol. And that's a whole nother discussion for another day. But it's interesting all the ways that just all the pieces of our story become so interwoven, and even all of the past things that we've been through influence the present decisions we make. Anyways, different story for a different day. So you left, and I feel like for you, it was like this last ditch effort to ever have a chance at change and a successful relationship. And honestly, throughout that process, we both encountered a lot of change. Tell me how your mindset shifted in that season.
Well, I think the biggest way is going from a mindset of, obviously living a double life and one lie after another, to learning how to be honest with myself, with counselors and those trying to help me, being completely honest.
Mm-hmm.
I went from a self-focused, and this is still a daily thing that I work on, but it's just still a going from a self-focused recovery versus others focus. So
Mm-hmm.
I had this way of thinking that this only affects me, that the things that I'm doing are only affecting me, so I can live with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I can control that kind of storyline to a mind shift of realizing how it affected so many other people, how it affected my family. Ultimately, yes, it was affecting me, but now it's affecting someone else, and that was where I had to make that ultimate decision, to get help. There was this realization that I came to that this secret life was directly impacting my real life.
Mm-hmm. And I know that we both read the book by Ed Milet, The Power of One More. Sorry, could not think of that. But in the very end of the book, he talks about his father's recovery journey. And I love the phrase, or the little section, where he's talking about the why in recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, linking huge emotional reasons to what you want to accomplish is the key to why you must be willing to go through the difficult struggles associated with change.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that whole season of our life was really difficult. And whether we wanted to do that and walk through that or not, it just happened. And you desperately wanted your family and this version of what life was supposed to look like. And I feel like it became a driving force to make that change happen in your own life.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't look like that was going to happen for a while, but it became the catalyst for really both of us to walk out a healing journey individually before we could ever consider what life could possibly look like together. And we both had to get to this point where we didn't need the other to live a healthy and functional life. Tell me your thoughts on that.
Well, I think that hits the nail on the head. I had to get to this point to where I was, with the people I was working with in my recovery, where whether you were to leave, whether you were to stay, whether we were together or apart, I'm going to be okay, and I'm going to make healthy choices for my recovery regardless.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of my circumstances, surroundings. I've got to make the healthy choices for my life.
Mm-hmm. So after that initial phase, I mean, obviously there were lots and lots of changes that unfolded.
Mm-hmm.
But tell me, what were the biggest shifts that you made after that initial phase? Maybe give us the top 3 things that you incorporate into your daily life to this day to stay in recovery.
I think the 3 most important things. Number 1, I did get into a 12-step program of recovery. And in that 12-step program of recovery, going to meetings, was getting a sponsor. So that this is basically a mentor that, in that program that gave me a chance to practice that honesty principle in my recovery, and gave me someone to talk to who had been through similar situations and was in similar situations.
Mm-hmm.
And I could listen to him. He would offer me advice on his experience. And it made me feel not alone in the stuff that I was dealing with, because I had somebody who had dealt with a lot of the same things or could give me advice on that. But I think the program, 12-step program is not only about getting rid of addiction or solving addiction, but it has infiltrated every aspect of my life to make me a healthier person overall. Mm-hmm. I mean, it really touches every aspect of your life. It has changed the way I make decisions, understanding that it's okay to feel my feelings. It's okay. And I don't have to make my decision out of the emotion at the time. I can make decisions based on who I want to be and where I want to go in life.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3 would probably be, and this may sound counterintuitive, but actually setting up roadblocks to keep me from going back down the road to that self-imposed prison that I lived in for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Those roadblocks look like accountability software, like Ever Accountable, to monitor my internet use, deleting all types of social media. Even I think we even threw out TV for a while. It took us a
We
while
did.
before we got TV back in the house, and I had to get to a place where I was willing to do anything not to be in that, my quotations, prison. And sometimes that meant making decisions that other people didn't necessarily understand or even agree with at the time. But I knew they were right for me personally and right for our family.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we had to just go with that because we knew it was right for us, no matter what other people thought.
Yeah. And I totally agree with that. And it doesn't mean that you always have to live life to an extreme, such as getting rid of your TV. Um, but I think that you need to know your limits and have those strong communicated boundaries in place. I know that was something that we had a lot of back and forth on, is like just communicating like, hey, this is what I'm feeling. This is where I feel safe. This is where I feel unsafe. And I think in some ways that can sound really cliche, but when you're actually walking out this process day to day and everything in life feels really fragile, like that's really important to really voice those feelings and those boundaries, and to like create a safe place for each other, so that you feel like there's some safety in the relationship and you can actually start building that trust.
Totally agree with that.
Yeah. So many changes. And honestly, like this is where I wish that I could say like, oh, we're a success story. Like everything's great. But I mean, honestly, it is that day to day, just journey. And who's defining success and who's to say that it doesn't all fall apart tomorrow? And I think that is something that we've had to come to accept together. And I think it took me a lot longer than it did you. Of like, there are no guarantees. And I really believe that we're just living on holy middle ground. And like God has been so good and we're experiencing that kindness of God while also very acutely aware that our daily choices will impact the outcome of our lives, our relationship, our family, and the legacy that we pray to leave behind. And it really is just that day-to-day journey, leaning into Jesus, holding on to hope, and living out love. There was this 24-hour rule that you taught me about, and then we'll wrap it up. And I feel like it took me a really, really long time to accept this. And that was, just I had to walk my own journey with that as well. But I had to let go of this timeline. And I think we both got to this place where we let go of this timeline and we could only focus on today. And I feel like, again, referencing Ed Milet's book, The Power of One More, where he's still talking about his dad's recovery. But I just feel like he sums up that rule so well, where he says, my dad didn't try to stay sober every remaining day of his life. He tried to stay sober one more day of his life, one day at a time, stacked upon each other until days became weeks and months and they became years. The difference in that kind of mindset means everything to a recovering alcoholic. And I think we could insert here, like, it means everything to anyone recovering from anything.
Yeah,
Give me
I can
your
totally
thoughts on
agree
that.
with, the 24-hour rule. It's really been especially in recent years, a life-changing principle that in my life, in our life, but going from a mindset in the past of, especially in the beginning of our journey, trying to look so far down the road,
Mm-hmm.
and it just gets daunting. It's like, how are we ever going to make this work
Mm-hmm. It feels
long
so
term?
unsure.
And I know I felt in my mind I could never give you that long term, like it's crazy. It's so unsure. But then this 24-hour rule, came up in recovery, and it's like I had to, it's another mindset change
Mm-hmm.
of literally looking at 24 hours at a time
Mm-hmm.
and saying, with every decision that comes up, every obstacle, every good thing, bad thing, what is the next right decision that I can make to better?
Mm-hmm.
What's the next right healthy decision I can make? What's the next right decision for my family? What's the next right decision for this? And it really applies to anything, not just addiction, not just
Yeah.
relationships, anything. It's like, what can I do the next right thing from, if it's 8:00 in the morning until 8:00 tomorrow morning,
Mm-hmm.
What can I do?
It's
You
so
know,
interesting. I think this is the first time that I've actually linked this. But I shared this on, I think it was like the second episode or something. But during the time that we were split, I really had this one question that I felt like God just laid on my heart, because obviously, like, I probably would not have come up with it on my own in that season. But it was like, okay, God, like, I don't think I can make it through this season, this day. What do I do next? And I never thought about that until just now, like as a 24-hour rule. But in theory, it kind of was, because it was like, okay, God, like, this day feels impossible. What do you want me to do today? Just today. And I feel like that's kind of cool that I
right.
just made that connection.
Well,
But
and I can also remember times of, like, when we were split, and people would tell me, do what you can today.
mm-hmm.
Do what you can and work on today. You can't control tomorrow. You can't control a year from now. You don't know. That's out in the future. But the biggest thing in this program, and I think a fourth thing, is just learning how to be present and not try to look forward. And that's the whole 24-hour rule too, is just being present. And that, I think, is one thing that recovery has given me, is the ability to be present with you, is to be present with our kids, and be in the moment and not thinking 50 steps ahead or a year ahead.
Yeah.
It's just staying in the moment. And it's so life-giving, I feel like.
Yeah. Who knew the 24-hour rule could change your life? But it can. On that note, with statistics as high as they are for this problem, most likely there is someone listening that is struggling through this as well, or has a spouse or a family member struggling through this as well. What is just kind of your last word of advice should someone find themselves struggling with this issue? What would you say to that person as a first step? Or is there a condensed first step? Ours was obviously very complicated and very long.
I mean, I think it comes down to really two things that come to my mind as I think about that is first, honesty. If it's a situation with you and your partner, there were secrets are kept, be honest, confide in them, complete honesty.
Mm-hmm.
And then second, which is a two-parter, like basically drop the pride and seek help.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a bad thing to need help.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a bad thing to admit that you need help. And I think if you have the honesty as much as you can,
Mm-hmm.
and then ask for help, I think those are the two biggest things that come to my mind when it comes to this issue.
Yeah. And I think that's, just based off of experience, like that's where we had to start, was just accepting the facts, the reality that we found ourselves in. And then we had to find people that we could trust and go to for help.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's been a journey all the way. But I'm so grateful that God has been with us every single step of the way. Even those really dark, lonely, confused, chaotic, messed up moments. He's always been there. But we're going to wrap up this episode. And I'm going to link a few resources in the show notes just related to this topic. So be sure to go check those things out. If Ever Accountable is something that you are interested in, I'll also have a link to their website as well. You can check that out. But y'all, this is my whole heart behind this podcast. Walking out this recovery journey alongside Justin, it has changed everything. Not only from watching him walk out his recovery journey, but also learning how to walk out my own recovery journey alongside him. And it's just been a really beautiful, life-changing, hard journey that I'm so grateful for. And I just want to tell you that walking out recovery from anything, it doesn't have to be this issue, but wherever you find yourself, there are a million ways that your life can change when you're willing to make a change in your day-to-day decisions. And I think, I just want to tell you that you can be so incredibly low and God can still step in and He can redeem your story. And I never want you to feel so alone or so broken that you feel like you can't ask for help. I want you to know that there's hope for your story, and I hope you surrender it all to God and lean into writing this next chapter with Him. That's all for today's episode, friends. Tune in next week. Hopefully we'll be on a lighter subject.